This episode was made possible by our generous patrons.
Pictures up, last look. Welcome, friends, to episode 166 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book
and then see the movie.
I'm Luke.
And I'm James.
And this week we take a look back at all the things we covered in 2020. So, you made it. If you're listening to this, you made it to the end of the year. We're the final message before you take that last door out. Maybe the final boss is behind the door. I don't know.
We don't know yet. Yeah.
But you're here.
We hope not. But it's been a crazy year. And we have a lot to look back on. That's sort of the premise of this episode, is to look back at a lot of our projects from 2020.
Yeah, what a fucking year. And it's funny, is we got 2 days or so before New Year's Eve at the time of recording this, so maybe we don't make it. But if you're listening to this, you've made it.
Right, yeah.
That would be dark. But hopefully we all made it. And at the very least, in this fucking disaster dumpster fire of a year, we had some fun covering some stuff. Some books, some movies, some other sources, some other adaptations. And a lot of you came along for the ride. Whether you listened to every episode or you just listened to certain ones here or there, we appreciate it. And we're glad to have you.
I mean, it's been a testing year for basically everyone. It's been the year that we've spent inside. I can't even imagine if I didn't have the podcast, how I would have spent some of my time, I already had a lot of open time just sitting at home doing nothing. When you don't have the motivation or the want to do anything at all. And then you're bummed an hour or two later when you're like, why did I just do nothing? That was the whole year for us this time. So, it's been a nice outlet to be able to communicate with people, stay in touch with people, and cover these projects that I think I've been able, to escape into a lot this year.
Absolutely. And looking back at some of the early projects, it feels like they weren't in 2020 because some of them are predate, March, which is when all the stuff with COVID really started kicking off. Which makes it sound like a good thing, the opposite of that. But you know what I mean? It feels like a different year when I'm like, oh, we did cover that in 2020. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, I was working out of a hotel room. I was working on a TV show at the time, and it was a crazy time. And then I went on vacation February, got back, and then everything closed down, and it was just not the podcast. I look at those episodes and I'm like, oh yeah, what was what was I doing when I was reading this book or whatever? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, holy shit, I was in a hotel room or I was out, doing something for work. And then it turned into nothing but being at home. Just what a year.
Yeah,
I know
at the start
felt the same
at the start of the year for me, I was in an Airbnb because I had been displaced from my home to have repairs done after a water flooding. And I was in an Airbnb. I remember that for multiple projects. And then I spent some time in a Marriott, right when COVID was starting to happen. I think those early Return of the King episodes, I was recorded in a Marriott. So yeah, same thing. Bizarre to think about.
Just what a weird year. But we covered a lot of stuff. We'll sort of move into this here in a second. I have some stats on we have a lot of stats. We like to bring stats to this episode.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but I think it's fun to touch base every year with certain ones. And then whenever I look back at these episodes, I'm always curious to see where we've gone and where we were and all that stuff. But I know you have a breakdown of what we actually covered this year. Which
right, yeah, number of projects, number of episodes, number of number of movies we watched, number of books we read. But first, I think we were listening to our last looks from 2019.
Oh, yeah.
And we stumbled upon this moment where we were looking forward to 2020.
What a weird moment, man.
What we're going to do now is play that audio just for sort of posterity's sake, and just so you can hear where we were at the end of 2019 and looking into 2020. And how we were so wrong in some ways and yet how we were so right.
Yeah. All right. Roll the tape. All right, man. All that's left to do is to look forward to 2020. which seems like a sci-fi year. Seems like we're all going to be living in a cyberpunk world.
We're already past Blade Runner at this point.
Yeah.
We're past Back to the Future, I think,
now.
We're past, we're past all of the things.
Yeah, we are living in the future.
We're in the future.
Especially next year. 2020, it's just got such a nice ring to it.
Yeah.
Let's hope it's a good year and not a fucking awful one.
Yeah.
It could be a dystopian nightmare.
Yeah. I think this
especially
is
in our
the
country.
revolution. This is the revolution.
Could be the revolution. I don't know, man.
I gotta stay optimistic.
I am both optimistic and terrified of what this year might bring.
Yep.
But I'm gonna choose to be optimistic today. And let's look forward to this. Think about some of the things we know we're going to cover in the coming year, which is kind of tough because, sometimes there's release dates that move around. Maybe we'll say something that ends up getting delayed and then it won't even come out. But yeah, maybe hit me with like one thing you're looking forward to in 2020. Yeah, so survey says dystopian nightmare.
Yeah, right. I mean, how we kind of, I don't know, we touched on, you said dystopian nightmare, there was a revolution, a social revolution, I would say. I
mean, we voted the fucker out, so let's say that at least happened.
Yeah. I mean, and then we were about to start talking about things we're looking forward to, and you were like, but who knows, delays happen, and these things, and it's like, yeah, everything was delayed.
I mean, I'm not to give myself like a pat on the back because it's a bizarre thing to talk about, but like, I was super on the fringe of reading about the COVID stuff when it was happening in China, in Wuhan specifically. I don't remember exactly when that was, but I feel like it was around the new year. And I had been reading all this stuff and like worrying reports, and like I'm the kind of person who has a lot of anxiety and worries a lot about big global things happening. And so I remember thinking like, what if this is the big pandemic that goes all over the globe? Because like it's something that we've been warned about like my entire life. People talked about it happening. And so I think there was a bit of that in my mind. And then a lot of it is the Trump stuff. A lot of it is me going, what the fuck's going to happen politically in this country? So it's a mix of those two things made me seem a little bit prescient there. In some ways, although I also still feel like I was way too optimistic. I just try and be that way.
And that's just going to show, like, I'm going to be optimistic going into next year, into 2021.
Yeah.
But what should we just not say? Should we just say, let's be optimistic and go from there?
Yeah,
just, like,
I'd rather live my life that way, like a little bit optimistic, hedge my bets a little bit, and that's what we'll just have to do looking forward to 2021.
What a bizarre, like, look back and, like, hindsight of what we've been through. Haunting, honestly.
Yeah, and to talk about the projects we were so sure we were going to cover, I think we go on to list like 6 projects that we don't cover. I think one of them.
Dune.
Dune, obviously. Still waiting on Dune. I think Return of the King, I think, is the only one in the list that we actually covered this year, so... we're going to do it again at the end of this episode. We're gonna look forward to 2021. We're going to list some projects we're looking forward to. But before we get there, you got some stats. But before, I do want to give the headlining event is we're going to be naming the worst source material and the best adaptation this year that we covered on the podcast, of course. But we thought that would be fun.
Yeah, as well as the inverse too, because we're going to give worst and best source material and worst and best adaptation.
Yes, I guess I didn't say that, but yes, both for both. So look forward to that. That's going to be the episode. We'll talk about our reasoning why we chose each one. Maybe we'll argue. I don't know, or maybe we'll agree. We'll see. It's always fun to find out. I don't know what you chose for any of these, and you don't know what I chose for any of these. So we'll be finding out on air. Yeah,
I'm sure we'll have common ground. But okay, so going into this here, the number of projects that we did, number of actual, like, sort of, whether it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks, 1 week, whatever it was.
We qualify a source and adaptation combo as one project, no matter how many weeks it takes, whether it's 1 or 4 or 5, whatever.
So we had 23 projects this year, and we had our 150 episode retrospective as well. So I wasn't considering that a project, but it's also right there. So really 24 specific projects that we were focused on throughout the year.
It feels like more. I think if I listened to the episode last time, I think it was maybe 1 or 2 more than we did in 2019.
I believe it. We did a lot of like one-off episodes this year. We did a lot of like combo episodes where it was book and movie in one. And we did. It's funny how it sort of averages out to like a project every 2 weeks for the whole year.
It does, yeah.
Okay, so and then the number of episodes, the number of total episodes that we put out this year on the main feed, not including bonus episodes, because we clearly put out 12 bonus episodes, one every month, on our Patreon. And if you're interested in that, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/InkToFilm. Quick plug.
Really, James?
Yeah, so 45 actual episodes throughout the year, and then we had 5 from the Vault episodes, which are former Patreon exclusives that we've put into the main feed for people to get a taste of that.
So would you say 45?
45 episodes, yeah.
Out of 52 weeks, and then so I mean, it feels like we maybe took a few more weeks off this year, but considering what year it was, that makes sense.
Yeah, and like even so, like 45 episodes in a 52-week year is pretty not bad at all in my opinion.
Not bad.
So number of movies we covered, 25. 25 movies, and that includes 2 TV shows. So 23 movies.
Adaptations.
Yeah, I mean, 2 TV shows I think is lower than last year, maybe I believe so. Yeah. But TV shows that we've talked about, TV shows take up a lot of time. Like this year we covered Lovecraft Country and The Outsider, and each of those was like a month, I would say.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. So that's a sixth of our year right there on 2 projects. That's why we can't do too many of them, but as much as like it feels like half of all adaptations that come out these days are TV shows, so it's really tough.
Yeah. 23 though. 23 actual feature film movies that we watched. That's not bad. In addition to the other ones we're watching throughout the year too, like I think that's a pretty strong number.
For sources, I think my Goodreads gave me the hint on this one. I think we did I want to say 20 books. Now that doesn't count a couple of things, so I wonder if the number you got is different.
Yeah. Okay, so 23 books. Okay. But that's including 5 short stories and 3 graphic novels or comic books.
Okay, yeah. So I think some of the short stories don't count on my Goodreads is what it is. / like Cinderella and stuff. I'm not sure if I counted that.
Yeah. Short stories that I counted: Minority Report, Total Recall, Screamers, Cinderella, and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Mm-hmm. And then graphic novels and comic books: Snowpiercer, The Old Guard, and V for Vendetta.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that was a little more than previous years. Cool. So that's what we did this year. I think it's a pretty good body of work. And because of that, what we're going to do is we're going to look at everything we covered, and we're going to pick best and worst. Obviously it didn't necessarily come out this year, but that we talked about. And we're building on our body of work from years past. Yeah,
I'm really excited to start talking about most the best of each, what we thought was the best, at least. Mm-hmm. I do want to say we had 7 guests as well.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to find out. So that's more, because last year I know we had a reduction. I think we were down to like 4. Okay, So 7 guests. I'm not going to be able to name them all. So do you have them all? Yeah,
I got them. Curtis C. Chen.
Yeah, joined us for Princess of Mars.
Yeah, and that was right at the beginning of the year. That's another one that sort of feels so far away with John Carter and Princess of Mars. That's so long ago. And then we also had Mary Muscari at the beginning of the year.
Right, Water for Elephants, yeah. I think that was right afterwards, or very, very shortly after.
Very shortly after, yeah. All of these are in order of appearance.
Okay.
We also had Caitlin Starling come on after that.
Yeah, Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, those were fun episodes for sure.
Really fun.
Actually, she was just on for the movie episode for that one, though. I think we did the book on our own.
I believe so, yeah. Michael Arnzen came on.
Good old Mike Arnzen. He's one of our favorites. It's nice to have returning guests, which I know we had at least one other.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Arnzen was on our first year when we had half a year.
So
for him to return, that was like 2.5 years later.
Yeah.
If not
so the first time he came on was for The Thing, and then this year he joined us for The Exorcist, our Exorcist movie episode in particular, which was a really cool episode.
I love that episode, yeah. And then we had Remy Nakamura back on.
Yeah, Remy is our third time, I think, guest. He joined us for Lovecraft Country, which is great.
He's our 3-peat guest, yeah. Lovecraft Country was a lot of fun with him as well. And then we had J.S. Arquin.
Yeah, JS joined us for V for Vendetta, which was right around the election, so it was a really wild time to be covering that one for sure.
And then, what followed after the election, and it was just fucking madness. But yeah, that was a lot of fun to have him on for the movie. And then most recently we had on Marcy and Akko from the Colored Pages Book Club.
Yeah, and that was a really cool, unusual episode for us because we were covering Cinderella, which is, already not the kind of thing we normally read, but then we watched this musical, which is, I don't think we've ever covered a musical before. But man, that was a fun episode. I remember laughing a ton during that coverage and just having a great time. So hopefully everybody checks that one out.
Yeah, they were great guests. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, that's all of our guests.
Wow.
And we love our guests, obviously. We everything that they've done, please go check out those people. We talk about it on most of their episodes.
Yeah, listen to their podcasts, buy their books if they have books,
Definitely.
support them. Let them know that we sent you too, because that's always fun.
Yeah. We're looking forward to having more guests in 2021. So thank you to all of our guests who were on this year.
Yeah, if there's anybody that you would really want to have us to have on the podcast, feel free to email us about it. I'm not saying we will necessarily do it, but I'm always open to suggestions.
All right, so I think it's about that time we move into the best and worst.
Oh, actually, before our very first topic is most surprising. Surprise, we're starting with that topic.
Yep.
Every year we talk about this because we felt like best and worst is, the polar ends, but there's always other notable things that happen. And I think this is the spot for like really notable things that happened this year during our coverage. Our most surprising topics. And I have, according to my outline, I'm starting this one off. So okay. I'm gonna lead. And I know I did something a little different than you. We were talking beforehand. So what I did is I had a lot of surprising things, but I narrowed it down to a surprising thing that happened in a good way and a surprising thing that happened in a bad way. And then for each of those, I had a runner-up. So I'll just briefly give the runner-up, and then I'll give the main one. So let's start worst and go to best. So most surprising in a bad way, my runner-up was One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest book. And that was specifically because we did that coverage in 2 episodes. We did the start of the book and the second half of the book. And like, I remember the tone shift so dramatically between those 2 episodes because there's so much like sexist, problematic stuff that happens at the end of that book.
Yeah.
And it really soured my appreciation of it because I was having such a good time with it. And it's not to say that it was a terrible book. It just completely changed the way I felt about it and felt about Ken Kesey.
Yeah, the first half felt like a slam dunk. We were like praising it like unabashedly. We were like, this is the greatest thing ever. And then the next episode we had to come in and be like, all right, well, we spoke too soon a little bit.
Yeah. So, okay. But my main one for most surprising in a bad way was The Outsider, for kind of a similar reason. And the reason it takes the cake, though, is because it was both show and book, and it happened at the same time. Because we read and covered the end of the show and the end of the book, and we had all these weeks leading up to it where we were so hot on it. We were loving it. And then we get to the end and we felt like the show and the book are just so underwhelming. And, I guess that's a bit of a spoiler. So if you haven't read it yet, I'm sorry. I won't give any specifics, but in general, we just felt like it was a step down. Now, some people may disagree with that. And, I know people do. So, check out the actual episode so you can hear our reasoning why. But yeah, just a disappointing end to what was such a promising start for both the show and the book.
I don't want to say too much about this one right now because it's going to show back up, but I agree. Yeah.
Spoiler for the episode.
It was surprising the way that it all shook out at the end. Mm-hmm. Prestige HBO drama and a Stephen King novel that we were, like you said, the first few episodes we were liking both sides a lot. We were really enjoying it. And because we cover our shows, and sometimes we cover our shows as like, we'll read half the book and then we'll watch half the show, and then we'll come together to do the second half of the book and the second half of the show at the same time. It sort of was just like a steep decline. But I'll give you my most surprising project, and I'll start with my runner-up.
Okay, and then I'll go into my good one because I do have those still too. I told you I had a lot.
Yeah, my most surprising tended to be more positive. They were like, right. So I guess that'll lead you into yours as well. And I do want to preface like a lot of these by saying a lot of my choices were made by like what has stuck with me. So if it doesn't necessarily specifically line up with what we said in the episodes or anything like that, like my best and my worst and all of these things.
Hindsight changes the way you look at things sometimes.
Yeah, and so like the way that I've approached this is like. With the advantage of time and looking back and thinking about the project over again, which ones are my best and worst? And again, we're saying worst, but at the same time, it's like, I don't think anything was like abysmally awful that we covered on the podcast in general. Maybe I'm wrong, but we say best and worst on a list of the things that we actually covered this year, not everything that came out or anything like that. So,
all right, that's enough waffling. I think they get it.
Yeah, most surprising project for me this year. My runner-up, and this might be a little bit of recency bias, but my runner-up for most surprising was Interview with the Vampire.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
And it was just because like I knew the cultural context, and I like sort of
wait, specifically movie or book?
Well, both. The project as a whole was most surprising project. Yeah. So I was surprised at how the book was so raw. We had talked a lot about how it's very human and it's from a very raw place for the author. And then the movie was just like a fun vampire film that would go on to influence all vampire films beyond. And so in that way, I just didn't expect the impact to hit me as hard as it did, because it felt like it was something that was everybody was like, yeah, it's great, but it's like, it's really, really great. Like, go back and visit it, and I feel like
I remember going into that episode, you said you had never seen the movie, and I was kind of excited for you to see it because I felt like you were kind of sleeping on it. I was like, I think he's going to enjoy this movie a little more than he thinks he's going to. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to, like, bias you or
expectations.
Whatever, set expectations.
So,
yeah, cool.
In Interview with the Vampire is my runner-up, my most surprising project, and it's only most surprising because it exceeded expectations, was Lovecraft Country, just the project as a whole. It was I was excited for it. I knew it was coming. We saw it from a mile away. We knew we were going to cover it, and it still was so surprising to me at like how it was so prescient. It was so, like, it felt so important at the time, and still today, right now. But just the way that the book was written, and then what the show represented, it was just an overall positive surprise.
Yeah, that's a good one. Honestly, no, can't find any fault with being surprised by that. It absolutely was. All right, so for real quick, my good one, surprise, Total Recall, the movie. I was surprised by how good it ended up being. I had heard that it was good, but I had my doubts. I actually ended up really liking that movie. I'm not saying it's like a masterpiece or anything, but it's just way better than I ever thought it was going to be. So that was cool and definitely surprising. But my real winner is The Princess Bride book, which surprised the hell out of me and how much I liked it, because I, on that episode, talked about how I'm not the biggest Princess Bride fan of the movie. Like, I like it okay, but I'm not as like into it as many other people are. And I really didn't know what to expect from the book, but it really wasn't what I got. It's a very unusual, very meta, and then all the different layers that go into it, and then in the really fun final edition where we revisit these characters after the events of the story we know. I don't know. It was just all a big surprise for me, and I really enjoyed it. So that was my positive surprise.
Awesome. And that was your winner, right? That wasn't your runner-up?
That was my winner for most surprising, in a good way. I don't know if we want to do two separate categories next year, surprising bad, surprising good. I don't know. Maybe it could be worth
We'll figure it out, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're into worst source material now.
Before we get into that, I have a goofy stat that I wanted to share with you. So
let's hear it.
On Spotify, they have this thing, it's like Spotify for podcasters, year wrapped. Now, everybody saw their year wrapped music going around, right? They had one for podcasters, and I clicked on that link, and it took me to my dashboard. And one of the cool things you can see on there is the top 5 artists that listeners of your podcast listen to.
Oh, sweet.
Isn't that kind of fun?
That's awesome, yeah.
So I thought that'd be kind of cool to share. So here's our number 5 to number 1. Listeners of the Ink to Film podcast, here were your top 5 artists. Number 5, Panic at the Disco.
Nice. Cool.
Brendan, you're solid, right?
Yeah, great singer.
Now, I will preface this. It's a lot of pop, which makes sense when you're sampling a large, quantity of people. You're going to get a lot of pop, right?
For sure.
Okay, number 4, Ariana Grande.
I literally don't know if I know a single one of her titles for any of her songs, but that's awesome. Like,
I'm sure I do, but I can't name one. But I'm sure I've heard them.
If I heard one of her songs, I know that I've heard them, but I don't like, she's not an artist that I've really listened to, but I've seen her in interviews and stuff. I respect her.
She seems cool for sure. You know? All right. Number 3, Queen.
Hell yeah, dude.
Yeah. I was really happy with that one too.
Cool.
Queen is an awesome, and number 3 too. That was really cool. Number 2, Billie Eilish.
Okay.
Also
again,
solid. I mean, super popular, so it makes sense. She's really talented
plus
too.
a very unique voice who's kind of changing pop music right now and stuff. I think
absolutely.
She's awesome.
And then number 1, T Swift herself is our number 1 artist, which I know lots of people who love Taylor Swift. I like her okay. I'm just not like a big fan or anything, but I totally get it. Lots of people love T Swift, and Taylor Swift is kind of on top of the world right now. Also, she put out 2 albums, so I'm sure that bumps her up the, you know what I mean? Like, it bumps her up the rankings. Everybody's listening to her this year.
Yeah, and like my girlfriend's such a massive fan, like unbelievably massive fan, and props to her for sort of like not ever being contained to like one specific type of pop, and like pursuing the different sounds she wants and being her own sort of artist. Like she's definitely been really good for the music industry, so awesome for her.
Anyway, I just thought that was kind of fun. Like, whenever I get a weird thing like that, insight into our listeners, it's kind of cool. I was also able to see that I think our gender breakdown was something like 53% women, 47% male, and I don't know, there was some percentage of like unspecified, which is cool. And I don't know, I just thought that was fun. I think that also kind of reflects the reading population, because I think more women read. So I wonder if that's some carryover there. Also, it's just Spotify, not all platforms. So I don't know how true that is across all platforms for us. Anyway, so we got to get into something negative now, though, which is negative. Always kind of a downer, but I think it's important to do. We got to name our worst source material for the year, and you're leading off on this one.
This was the hardest category. This was by far the hardest category for me. Because like I said, it was easier for me to pick worst adaptation than it was to pick worst source. Mm-hmm. And, I almost didn't even want to do this one because it doesn't necessarily feel extremely fair, but my worst source material, and again, caveat, not saying that it's bad. It's just on the list of things here. I selected worst here.
All right. I'm noting it for the official record.
Yeah, my worst source was Water for Elephants.
Okay.
Now listen, and it's not because it's a bad book. It's because I think that it doesn't necessarily speak to my sensibilities all the way. And I think that on the list of things that we covered this year, that's sort of the one thing that I was like, you know what, I enjoyed it as a project overall. I loved having Mary Muscari on, but something about the source for it wasn't necessarily like up my alley as much as some of the other stuff. So,
you know why that didn't make my list? It was because I remember liking the book more than I liked the movie. So anytime I felt like I liked the book better, unless I'm going to pick the movie, which maybe you do, I'm probably not going to pick it. So I went somewhere different. Might not be a surprise for you. I ended up going with The Hunt for Red October by Tom Clancy.
I thought you might, yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about how I was a little more down on it in the episode. It's not a terrible book. But when I was thinking back, I was like, what was the project that I struggled with the most? That was kind of a slog to get through. And I kept coming back to that one. Was just so many technical details in there that I just didn't care about. Some of them were cool.
It's also pretty fresh. Yeah, it's also really fresh for us.
It's recent.
We just read that like a month or so ago.
Yeah, that's true. But I really don't think it's just recency bias for me. I really think out of the entire year, it was the one I had the most difficult time with. So it just, aggressively average book to me. I can see why it's popular, but I found out, I'm not a Tom Clancy fan, clearly. Maybe there's another book he wrote that would change my mind, but from that one, doesn't really do it for me.
And something else that I think makes worst source harder is that they don't typically make a movie on a book that doesn't do super well. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like a book has to do well. They're not going to go choose a book that doesn't sell and nobody's heard of.
Water for Elephants was hugely popular.
Exactly. So like that's why I think it's hard to choose worst source, because in this instance it's sort of like they're choosing specific things that can be adapted and then be on there. It's tough.
But that's the task, man. That's what we signed up for.
I didn't have a runner up in that case. That was my worst source because it was tough enough to pull that one out.
Same. I don't want to drag anybody else through the mud.
Best source.
So I do have some more stats. I'm gonna run through these quickly, but I also kind of want to compare them to last year because I think that actually is the most interesting. Our top 5 states we were downloaded in 2020. So last year, just as a refresher, we had number 5, New York, number 4, Illinois, number 3, Florida, number 2, Texas, number 1, California. This year, we have number 5, New York, same spot. Number 4, Ohio, swaps out with Illinois. Number 3, Oregon, which is back in the top 5 for the first time in a while because it was not there at all last year. Number 2, Florida, moved up from 3 to 2, and number 1 retained, California.
Wow.
So
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
So we lost Texas, right? Is that what that means?
Texas and Illinois both fell out, replaced by Ohio and Oregon. Yeah.
All right. Well, they're just gonna have to try harder next year.
Yeah. Well, or maybe Ohio and Oregon just really went hard this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. I like to hear like the different states, and I'm assuming just like last year, we were probably downloaded in all 50 states.
Yes, we were downloaded in all 50 states. I definitely made note of that. Yeah. So that's awesome, I think our 3rd year running, which is cool.
It's humbling. It's very humbling to know that everybody's like throughout the country, people are listening.
Yeah, and all over the world, which we'll get into in our next stat. But yeah, well, all over the world.
All right, so you start on best source, right?
Yeah, you're right. Next up, we get positive, which is fun. We're going to do best source, and I am, according to our outline, I am starting on this one. Yes. So what was our best source material? Now, also, you might notice last year we called it best book. This year we're calling it best source for the obvious reasons of I wanted to be able to talk about short stories or, whatever else we covered, graphic novels, and not have to worry about what exactly they are. So best source material for me, I'm going to go with one runner-up and one top choice. So my runner-up I have already talked about. It is The Princess Bride. And I won't belabor it too much other than to say that I just really enjoyed that book. It was very surprising, which I definitely touched on. And it was my runner-up for the best source material that we read this year.
Awesome, yeah. So my runner-up, this was
William
tough
Goldman,
for me.
right? Yeah, William Goldman.
William Goldman, yeah. It was tough for me to choose the best as well because there was sort of an embarrassment of riches. I, again, went with the thing that was most affecting to me. So my runner-up for best source was Lovecraft Country. And I know I just did it for most surprising project. This is a runner-up slot, so we'll leave it here. But the source material for Lovecraft Country was amazing, in my opinion. It captured
Matt Ruff, right?
Awesome. Yeah, Matt. Yeah, he crafted, and again, we talked about it in the episode, but it feels like a fine line to walk to be a white man in America writing about the Black experience and all of this.
Yeah, to put it mildly.
he was able to walk it, and I think then the show was able to sort of plant its flag and reclaim this story. And I just think that what he was able to create and in the way that it was taking sci-fi and fantasy away from Lovecraft and sort of a racist sort of way that he was writing a lot of these stories and center Black people, I think was just awesome. And Lovecraft Country is my runner-up for best source. Okay. Just a great idea for a story.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna give my actual winner, my best source. I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid It was not only the best source we read this year, but I think it's the best book I read this year. Not that I read a ton of books outside the podcast, but when I was just thinking about it, I'm like, what's the best book I read this year? I kept coming back to that one. Controversial book, controversial movie. It's going to lose people, but it just really spoke to my sensibilities, and it had all this heady psychological stuff and existential questions about what it means to be a creative and what it means to be intelligent and the anxiety and depression that can be inherent with that. And it was just things that I feel I grapple with in my everyday life and things I think about all the time. And I don't know, just the struggles of that character were captured so well by Ian Reid that it just elevated to another level. And then it has kind of a big reveal moment at the end. I won't spoil it. But that can lose some people, but I was on board and I had a good time with it. And it was I just remembered geeking out on that book. And then I think ultimately, I think I said I liked the book better. As much as I liked the Charlie Kaufman adaptation, I think I went with the book because, once again, for me, it just was an incredible piece of work.
So at one point I had that as my top answer, as my best source. I completely agree for all of those reasons. And that was my runner-up until I changed it to Lovecraft Country. My actual best source is Princess Bride. And you just talked about how... Because, I was expecting the movie to be the reason why it's so famous. Because I thought it would be pretty good, interesting fantasy story.
It kind of is the reason.
Right, but what I mean is that it wasn't sort of a normal fantasy story that was then turned on its head to be this comedic take. It was already a comedic take in the source. And that was surprising to me, and I didn't expect it. And for that reason, I put it as best source. It's a movie that I love, so to be able to get such a dense sort of fun experience from the book as well was really fun for me and important.
And it's different too, right? It was very different than the movie, but still so cool. And in your defense, you picked the book at the end of that coverage as your favorite of the two.
Which was surprising.
I was shocked when you did that.
Yeah. It was so much fun. I had to give props to the fact that almost everything that we love in the movie is from the book. And I was really surprised by that.
Except for Andre the Giant. Although he does make an appearance, at least in the version of the book.
And then retroactively makes an appearance in the version that we read, which was awesome. I'm Thinking of Ending Things was those three books that we just talked about, Princess Bride, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and Lovecraft Country were my three best books that we read this year, period. Any of those could have been alternated with. Yeah. And the reasons that you said you liked I'm Thinking of Things.
And this is a year where we read Return of the King, so...
Right. Well, again, same thing as last year. I didn't put it on my list in most cases for obvious reasons.
I just like how you just say that every year, and then like I think people have long forgotten what that means. Right. But let's just not explain it because I think it's better that way.
You can listen to last year if you don't know what I'm talking about. But
no, I think last year you just say for obvious reasons, and that's it.
For obvious reasons. Yeah. I'm thinking of ending things though. It was so hard for me because of the same reasons for you. That was basically my other runner-up, is because like it's so heady, it's so interesting. It was a debut novel. It was like it was just like it was literary while also being like this heady, like existential drama and
kind of like a horror thriller too at the same time.
Right. Yeah. Amazing book. I love that book. But we're into worst adaptation now.
Yeah. Before we do, I got some more stats for you though.
Let's hear it.
Okay. We were a little loosey-goosey today, but I mean that's how, it's 2020. That's what's gonna happen, right?
Oh, by the way, I'm drinking whiskey right now. So.
Yeah, it may or may not be affecting you. Okay, so yeah, again, I wanted to be able to compare where we're at with our top 5 countries to last year. So I'm gonna read off first off last year's top 5 countries from 5 to 1: Mexico, Germany, Australia, Canada, UK. Okay. So in 2020, we now have Germany slotted back to number 5. Ireland makes an appearance at number 4. Then our top 3 remain the same: Australia, Canada, United Kingdom. Obviously outside the US. US is number 1.
Wow.
Just on this
Ireland,
list,
huh? What did Ireland... I mean, that's amazing, Ireland.
Yeah, Ireland creeping up in there. I like to see that.
What fell off from Ireland? Do you remember
Mexico.
what was last?
Mexico fell off.
I mean, sad to see them go, but they'll be back, I'm sure. They'll pop back into the top 5 next year.
Yeah, definitely cool. And it's funny that Australia, Canada, UK kept their same positions. I think that's, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that we still maintain Germany. Like, a dark horse is in their top 5 2 years running now. So that's
awesome, yeah. Again, completely humbling. I just can't even fathom that people in all over the world want to hear what we have to say.
I don't have an exact stat on number of countries downloaded in, but I know Spotify said it was like 47. And that's just Spotify. I think we had more on Apple, so a lot of countries we were downloaded in. Let's just say that. Okay, but now we can get into our worst adaptations. So we got to get negative again. You are starting off this time. Worst adaptation.
Worst adaptation. Runner-up, you touched on it a little bit. The runner-up for me, worst adaptation, was The Outsider. And going in, I think it was a lot of what you were saying. We started the first half of the book, and it seemed like it was going to be this great Stephen King novel that we've become familiar with on the podcast. Like a lot of his, they're different enough, but he has this sort of style.
It was kind of like a true crime feel that we were really into starting off.
Yeah, and for that reason. And to specifically talk about the fact that it's the worst adaptation runner-up, it starts out, Jason Bateman has this he's directing a lot of the episodes. He's centered very heavily early on, and I was like, oh Jesus, Bateman did it again.
Don't spoil what happens.
No, I won't. Okay. I won't. I'm just saying Bateman's been able to create this entire HBO show for himself. It's a Stephen King novel. It's going to be massive. And then sort of as time goes on, it doesn't live up to the things that were expected from the early days of the show.
Yeah, and weird that it went hand in hand in the book with the book that way.
Yeah. So that was my runner-up. What's your runner-up?
I don't have a runner-up for this one. I only have one worst adaptation. So do you want to give you give me your top pick first? Okay, my top pick, not really surprising, I don't think. Worst adaptation was I Am Legend. Okay. Yeah. Now, all respect to Will Smith because he's a bona fide movie star and he's awesome. That movie is kind of a mess, and the source material is much more interesting, I think. It was this action vehicle that shouldn't have really been an action sort of cool guy. Couldn't really find its tone of what they wanted to do. There's a couple of memorable scenes, but the CG doesn't look great in most instances. Some of it doesn't make sense. I stand by in that episode, I think I talked about how there was 2 different movies within one movie with wildly different tones. And it really felt like they could not decide what movie they were making. And so they tried to do both, and instead they just did neither. They made a terrible... Okay, maybe not terrible. They made a very average movie because of that. I don't want to overstate it. Yeah. No, and honestly, that was going to be my runner-up. I thought about bringing it, but it had enough going for it where I didn't necessarily want to. Yeah, it feels like there's some studio meddling. There's this beginning scene that's a commercial for Mustang. Yeah, weird.
a lot of it's just weird and it feels off. And, I think that the source material didn't necessarily deserve that adaptation. And there are other adaptations. We actually watched another one for a bonus episode, and there's one other for us to cover from the book I Am Legend.
Yeah, Richard Matheson's book. Yeah. So it was almost my runner-up, but again, it wasn't quite bad enough for to make my list. Real quick before I give mine, I do want to speak on your The Outsider. The only reason I didn't choose that one is because there was a lot of really good stuff in that show. Those early episodes I thought were genuinely spectacular. And so it's hard for me to like completely sink it just based off of where it goes, but like I get it. So that was why it didn't quite make my list at all. My worst adaptation of the year was Screamers, which was based off of Second Variety Philip K. Dick, which is actually to date my favorite Philip K. Dick story we've read. I thought it was a great story, and then man, was that a bad movie. I think I was more generous to it in the moment because I was trying to be even-handed. Even though I said it was bad, I think I still was like finding good stuff. But like in retrospect, that's just a stinker of a movie. And it's my worst adaptation of 2020. I don't know what else to say about it.
I kind of forgot about that movie, to be
I
honest.
kind of thought you might have.
Yeah.
So I was like, how is Screamers not on his list?
Yeah, I think it passed because we did it and as a one-off too. I think it passed me by a little bit as I was like reviewing the year. But yeah, I think we had fun like sort of like poking at it.
Oh, there's nothing to be said for the episodes. The episodes
Right.
are for all these were fun. It's just the project itself. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I can't fault you for that. I think The Outsider was my runner-up for the reason that you said. Like, there was a lot to like in the show, and I was like really hopeful that it would keep up that sort of level of TV show. And then I Am Legend sort of, and like it kind of has a soft spot in my heart, I Am Legend, just because like I remember when it came out and it was this big thing and it did really well and lots of people were talking about it, but that movie's fucking
it was one of the cool things about that was watching the bonus features and seeing Anthony Fauci talking about the dangers of pandemics and even saying that in the next 10 years we are going to have a major global pandemic because we're overdue for one and it's going to happen. And I was like, holy shit. In the bonus features for that DVD.
Yeah, covering that project during a quarantine in a pandemic, it was fucking wild for sure. It was an interesting project to have covered.
Okay, so we are going to move into our best adaptation, which is kind of what like this whole, podcast leads to yearly. What was the best adaptation we got to? But before we get there, we like to go back and recap and talk about at least list what our top 10 most downloaded episodes were of the year. Because I think that gives kind of an indication for people. If there's any on this list that you missed, like maybe this is worth checking out because there is something to be said for the way the algorithm is always going to prioritize episodes that are getting more downloads and longer engagement. So there's something to be said for like the popular things tend to have something to them. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. The other thing that I think is always worth considering, however, when I give this is there a big caveat of it's always going to benefit early episodes and be a handicap for later episodes because they just haven't had as much time. Because we're only looking at downloads from this year. But anyway, with all those caveats being said, I'm going to quickly move through 10 through 5 and then or 10 through 6 and then we can like dive in a little more on the other ones. Number 10. Our Return of the King Part 2 book episode. Number 10. So that might tell you something.
I wonder if the other ones will show up.
Our book 2 episode was our 10th most downloaded. Our 9th most downloaded episode was our The Outsider HBO series episodes 1 through 5. So our beginning of the HBO series for The Outsider. Number 9 most downloaded episode.
Good section of the show.
Yeah.
Solid
Number
section.
8. I'm keeping it moving. Number 8 was our movie episode for The Return of the King. Number 8 most downloaded episode, which like honestly I thought might have been our number 1 this year. So a bit surprising. Definitely in the top 10 though.
Yeah.
Okay, number 7, our very first The Outsider book episode was our 7th most downloaded episode of 2020. Makes
Probably
sense.
Just striking while the iron's hot there, huh?
Yeah, Stephen King is always popular too. And then it was happening as the show was happening. It was a good time to cover it. Now here's a real shocker, I think. Number 6 most downloaded episode for the year was our Water for Elephants book episode.
Well,
Yeah, I thought that
Very
one
cool.
you might not have expected that. I think it's a popular it's a popular book by a popular author, Sarah Gwynn, I think.
It's the worst source of the year.
For you.
I'm just kidding. I mean, awesome. I'm glad people enjoyed that episode, or at least downloaded it and checked it out. That's
it was
really
a good
cool.
it was a fun episode though.
Yeah,
regardless of,
no
of
question.
what you might say about it. Okay, number 5 was our movie episode for Silence of the Lambs with
Awesome.
Caitlin Starling. Yeah,
Very
it was
cool.
it was a really cool episode. Jonathan Demme movie, which I don't know, awesome one to cover.
That sort of is one of your favorite movies, right? Wasn't that one of the ones that after we'd watched the movie, you said like this is like stayed in my favorite movies?
It's one of my favorite movies for sure. Yeah, great.
It's
movie.
amazing. Yeah.
Okay, number 4 is our highest ranked guest episode, and that was A Princess of Mars, our first episode of 2020 with Curtis Chen. Probably helped by being the first episode. It's had the longest time to accrue, but still, it's at our number 4 overall spot.
Awesome. That was a lot of fun too, having Curtis on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Curtis was great. Joined us for 2 episodes. It definitely a unique project to cover, and a cool like look back at sci-fi history. And then I was able to bring all that knowledge to Lovecraft Country, which references Princess of Mars like several times, which was
Right.
that was fun.
Well, and we talked about how the John Carter's that big Disney bomb, and we got to talk about all that stuff. So the whole conspiracy behind it and Star Wars influence and all that too.
Yeah. Good project. Okay, number 3 was our read/watch combo episode for the Minority Report. Very fun. Steven Spielberg, Philip K. Dick, Tom Cruise. You got a lot of big names, and it's a good movie, and I think it's cool to like. In some ways, I feel like that movie doesn't get enough credit, but like it's also not. It's imperfect, and there's like lots of ways you can talk about why it's not a perfect movie, but. Like, I also, like, meet people who it's, like, one of their favorite movies, and, like, I can't really fault them for that either, because it is really good, too.
I mean, yeah, it's like this. It's a solid Steven Spielberg sci-fi film with Tom Cruise, and it's just like I think we got the Tom Cruise bump on this one a little bit.
Yeah, well, and the Philip K. Dick, man, and he's got a lot of fans out there. As much as we're not the biggest fans of his writing, there are some great adaptations for him.
Yeah,
Which, by the way, I should say that's the other thing for Screamers. A lot of people say that's like one of the most faithful adaptations of his work.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can see why they say that. But in other ways, it really changes a shitload from that story.
Yeah.
So
I think it goes to show what people find to be important when they say, like, what's the best adaptation? Does it mean, like, faithful? Or does it mean sort of, like, is it a good movie that
yeah, because some people will say, it was the best adaptation. And you're like, that movie's not good. And they're like, yeah, but it's the best adaptation because they mean faithful. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, anyway, let's move on. Number 2. Our Return of the King Book 1 episode. Start of the project, that makes sense. Tolkien's always popular. An awesome one. It was a lot of fun. I was covering that in the hotel. I have a vivid memory of recording that first episode from the Marriott. It's just something else.
I mean, bittersweet to close out our Lord of the Rings coverage. Like we still have The Hobbit potentially on the horizon, but like to close out that trilogy of books and movies, like that's a huge project.
But we were still filled with a bunch of hope at the beginning there because we knew we had 4 weeks to go. So that particular episode was just getting it back into it, which is a lot of fun.
Right.
And then our number 1 episode. Any predictions?
Number 1. Oh, geez. I don't know, man. I haven't looked at the stats.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I thought this was kind of surprising. So our number 1 episode from all of 2020 was our book episode for Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris.
Wow.
Yeah,
Awesome.
no, just me and you, but that is our most popular episode from the entire year across all platforms.
I really like that episode too. That's very cool. I mean, Silence of the Lambs, another one we talked about, is just like this massive story. Huge story that like everyone has seen, and it's like the psychological thriller that people point to a lot of the times when they're like, what kind of movies do you like? They're like psychological thrillers. You're like, okay, Silence of the Lambs.
And I think it might be one of those movies one of those projects where a lot of people have seen the movie and are like, I really want to know what's going on in this book. I'm probably not going to read it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to listen to I want to listen to the episode. Or a lot of people who have read it and love Thomas Harris and are like, I want to hear, you know what I mean? I think it's both. Whenever you get both of those things coming together, it's a good mix for us.
Yeah. Awesome. That's cool to know. Number 1 episode of the year.
Yeah. But now the main event, the thing we've all been waiting for, the best adaptation, according to the hosts of the Ink to Film podcast in all of 2020 that they covered. we are going to start out with me, and then we're going to go to you. So I definitely have a runner-up for this one. And my runner-up... Actually, you know what? I have two runners-up. One of them we've already talked about extensively, so I'll be able to get through it quickly. One of them is Lovecraft Country. For me, fantastic adaptation. The way that it was reclaimed, the way that it was recentered, much like the story was about Black people, but then the show was made by Black people. And in that way, it was just like more authentic. There was a couple of quibbles here and there. You know, there were a couple of things that didn't work, that didn't quite make a great translation to the screen. Some plotting issues, some pacing issues. So I had just enough that kept it out of my top spots. That's why it's a runner-up, but I have to give it full props for being just a really notable adaptation, and it came out this year to boot. My other runner-up, however, is The Silence of the Lambs, Jonathan Demme, which we just talked about. Just an incredible adaptation, great movie. We talked about how it was like the first horror film to win Best Movie. Iconic performance by Anthony Hopkins that, like, you know, it's just one of the most legendary performances of all time, I think, for anybody.
He's like a Halloween character now. He's like a, you know, horror royalty at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just really amazing stuff. And it's just a great movie. And it's so that's a faithful one, right? Like, talk about how being just like an incredibly faithful adaptation. That's that one. Very little from the book that doesn't come right out. And because of that, that was what kind of broke my tie, because I was actually kind of tied with this other one. But the fact that most of it is in the source, it's like most of it's there, and then you bring in Anthony Hopkins and you make it, and it's a great movie. And I'm not trying to undersell it at all, but it was just enough to break the tie for me for an adaptation that truly transcended its source material, in my opinion, was incredible, and we haven't talked about it at all yet, and that was Snowpiercer. Bong Joon-ho. I loved this movie. I was so glad we covered it this year, and it's like so different than the source. The source wasn't bad. We had fun with it, but man, that movie is cool. And just talking about like the best adaptation, just what he was able to do with that source material, and the performances were just so. There's like a style there that we talked about that I love. Just zany action, like extreme violence at times, colorful, just wild situations and characters. A lot of fun. If you haven't seen Snowpiercer, I highly recommend checking it out and then listening to our episode on it. Yeah.
We get it. We gotta. If we ever end up doing that thing we've talked about, where we watch movies that aren't adaptations necessarily, we're gonna definitely watch some more Korean cinema, because I feel like it's like you're primed for it.
I probably am.
Okay, so I'm going to start by saying there's a bunch of stuff that was like runner-up to my runner-up. And I'm just going to list a couple of things that could have made my list that was tough to not say. The Exorcist as a film. And again, I a lot of these ended up for best adaptation. Part of me was thinking best film in general. So a lot of these are sort of like the ones that have stuck with me, the ones that mean the most to me. The best films in my eyes make for the best adaptations in some cases. So
The Exorcist is a fucking great adaptation. You know, it's like, it's crazy that wasn't on my list.
Right. The Exorcist, and this isn't even, that's what I'm saying, this is like off list. This is like off Broadway right now. So
wow.
The Exorcist, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, to not talk about that adaptation is like, I feel like a travesty.
It fixed a lot of the problems with the book, in my opinion. A great adaptation. I totally agree. We covered so many good ones this year.
Yeah. That's why it was so hard. This was the second hardest one besides worst source for me, figuring out my best adaptation. But my actual runner-up might surprise you. And again, you have to think about, these are the ones that are sticking with me that I think about on a daily basis, near daily basis. Best films, just incredibly poignant, all of these things. Runner-up for me is If Beale Street Could Talk. It was a movie. It's a movie that I think is so important, and it feels like something that everyone should watch, and it's so universal. It's showing Black love. It's showing the universal problems that everybody faces in this romance, and then at the same time showing what it's, the experience of a Black man in America. And just this year, the way that it hit me, that and then I mean, not to even talk about Barry Jenkins is like one of the greatest filmmakers of our time, helming it and creating
James
this
Baldwin source, you know,
James Baldwin source.
what a book.
Yeah,
You know, I've seen him everywhere this year. Like, you
yeah,
know, quotes from him, speeches, showed up
yeah,
in Lovecraft Country. It all came together, you know.
yeah. And so that was my runner up for sure. It was hard to not even put it as the best, but my best adaptation. Any guesses what my best adaptation was?
You know, it's funny because I feel like it's going to be Return of the King just because, but then I'm like,
For obvious reasons?
For obvious reasons, maybe you just didn't do it. I don't know.
No, for obvious reasons, I didn't do it. My best adaptation this year was I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Okay.
Charlie Kaufman, and for a lot of the same reasons, you know, we don't get the introspection that we get in the novel, because when you said that was your best source, right?
That was my best source. My best source and your best adaptation. That's kind of a fun symmetry there.
We don't get the introspection. We don't get as much as the existentialism, but in some ways we do. I think Charlie Kaufman sort of frames the story in this way, and you can interpret a lot of that stuff. And for a filmmaker like him, who can introduce a lot of these topics and still have the movie sort of play because this was a tough movie to pull off in general, and I don't want to give spoilers. But
and many people think he didn't.
Right.
Thinks he didn't. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, we thought he did. So you know.
Yeah. And I think taking big swings like this in a source material like this and giving it to Charlie Kaufman to create these sorts of, like, we need these sorts of movies. This is why movies exist. It's because, like, not everyone can tell this story in the way that he does, and he takes it to places that are going to challenge you. And I think that all of those things are good. And that was my best adaptation of the year.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So I'm Thinking of Ending Things for you, and Snowpiercer for me, which I'm sure you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like you didn't predict that one. That was maybe
No, I didn't.
field.
But that was a funny one, because, like, I liked that movie when it came out. I remember telling people to watch it and all of this stuff, and then coming to the podcast, I remember telling you, like, I think you're getting it a little overhyped. And then, like, once we'd watched it and analyzed it for the podcast, I was like, you know what? Everybody's right. It's amazing, and it always has been. And I always knew it was great, but I think I was sort of just, like, tempering. I was like, oh, I don't know, it's good, but, like, it's amazing. No question.
Yeah, and you've seen a lot more of Bong Joon-ho's stuff, so maybe you're, like, comparing it to his other work, whereas I haven't. So
yeah, and it's not my favorite Bong Joon-ho movie. So if that gives you any sort of background indication, maybe that's part of what was holding me back there too.
Yeah. All right, man, that was the main event, but we have a couple of follow-up things here, including what we're looking forward to most in 2021. It's time to sort of shift focus and look to the future. Before we go there, I do want to say we picked up 200 subscribers on YouTube, which, you know, by some accounts is not very many, but I remember in the last episode, the last Looks episode, we were talking about how we were hoping to hit 100 subscribers so that we could get our own URL. So, you know, I'm pleased to say we completely flew past that, and we're getting close to 300 now as of time of recording this. So if you're not already subscribed, definitely do that, because I think if you get to 1,000, you can actually, like, monetize, which, like, I don't know, I know it's not gonna be much money, but, like, it would be cool to be at a level where we could do that. And it requires 1,000 subscribers. So the idea that is even an attainable thing for us is really cool, because I didn't think it was, but, like, we've had enough growth this year where I'm like, yeah, we could get there potentially.
Yeah, I mean, we're a niche thing, right? Like, we're never going to be these, like, giant movie podcasts that have all this stuff, and we know that. And I think that, like, we weren't even necessarily pushing YouTube for a while there. You know, we were kind of just saying,
no, I mean,
YouTube.
we were still uploading backlog episodes this year.
Right. And so, like, to know that we were just kind of naturally growing without any sort of push from us, and then we've realized, oh, we should start pushing it a little more. It's fantastic, and it's all very humbling whenever people are interested in our content.
That also reminds me, some people may look at some of the numbers we have on YouTube and go like, your stats are wrong, dude, because I just looked at such and such on YouTube and it's got, 10,000 views. I was able to determine a method for weighting the downloads on YouTube, where it's basically based off of, like, average consumption versus our average consumption on, like, other podcasting platforms. And because some of those, we get a lot of people who click on them, like, looking for a bootleg version of whatever movie it is. So I did take that into account through my own sort of weighting of those stats. But obviously there's a lot of variation there, and there could be error and all sorts of things. So it is possible I got some stuff wrong. But anyway, we definitely have people who listen on YouTube. They comment great things. We've had some new followers and listeners that absolutely come from that platform. So I'm not trying to act like we're not valuing it. We absolutely do.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think we definitely have plans to someday do video content of some kind, whether it's like every once in a while. But yeah, it's always a platform that we're looking to maybe do more with, and
especially the higher subscriber count we get on there. It's cool to know that you have like a certain number of eyes that are going to be on it when it comes out,
right?
Which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, continuing to grow is the goal, and we've maintained that, and I'm just super proud of that, and I thank all of our listeners for them.
Yeah. So speaking of that, we do have some changes to our Patreon. We are going to get to our looking forward to, and this is kind of a thing we are looking forward to, is changes to Patreon. We had a tier on there called our Jukebox Heroes, where people were able to unlock tokens, use them to unlock specific projects. And we had a great time with that. But we kind of realized it wasn't really a scalable thing for us. We were struggling to keep up with just having a couple of patrons at that level. And we realized the more we got there, the more difficult it was going to be. So we decided to reimagine it, and we're going to be making some changes to our Patreon. We're going to be changing up different tiers. We're going to be introducing some merchandise options where you get like certain merch gear items at different tiers. Which should be really fun. We'll have more details about that as we get it ironed out. But one of the other things we're going to do is we still want to have patron input on what we cover at times. So we're going to have patron polls where you will get to vote on a poll, in which you will get to help us choose a project. I'm not sure how frequently we're going to do it. We've talked about maybe quarterly or every 4 months, something like that, where we're going to put something up. Maybe it'll just be like when we have openings. I'm not really sure. And then we'll specifically ask our patrons to vote on these polls. And then since you're a paying customer at that point, we're going to value what you say, and that'll be our way to have patron-led projects still, because that is still important for us to do. And we got a lot of good stuff this year from doing that.
Yeah, and if you were sort of thinking about doing the Jukebox Hero tier and because you wanted to financially support us by offering more money, we're going to have a lot of different tiers coming out. We're going to try to have like some pretty lofty ones, and there might be ones that people don't subscribe to because they're too high or whatever, but we feel like it's a good option to like allow for the support, and then also like we want to be able to give back to our patrons as much as possible. So I'm looking forward to the things we can do.
And at the time of listening to this, you won't be able to see those new tiers yet.
Right.
We're going to roll them out early 2021, so stay tuned on that. I know that was a big sales pitch, so let's move on. We are going to talk about things we're looking forward to in 2021. And we do have some things. First off, number one overall, the vaccine, the vaccine for COVID-19. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. My mom's a frontline healthcare worker, and she was vaccinated already, and she, because of that, was able to get her spouse vaccinated. So my dad and mom have been vaccinated. So
hey man,
I'm
congrats.
ecstatic.
That's awesome.
I'm ecstatic, and I'm just like, I sleep better at night, and I'm excited for everyone that we love and care about to get vaccinated as soon as possible.
Yeah, and once I'm vaccinated, that plays into like my feeling about 2021 and how I just want to do more, like I want to go places, I want to say yes to things, I want to go to parties, I want to go to gatherings, and I want to vacation, I want to go to conventions. I just want to do all the things, and I know I'm not going to be able to do all the things, but I want to do as many of them as I can force myself to do, because having that all taken away has just been, I know I got months to go. Like I am low on the list of vaccines. So like I'm probably got several months before I'm gonna be able to get one. But then once you get it, it takes a while before you're fully inoculated. And then you still have to follow certain, safety protocols and wear masks and stuff. But man, I can't wait for that feeling.
Yeah.
That being able to not have to worry about COVID. It's just,
definitely.
I'm sure everybody listening.
That was you had asked me sort of like New Year's resolution stuff, and in a way that sort of leads me into that, because like I wanted to be like I want to have a more consistent year in terms of like being compassionate with my fellow man, I think reaching out and helping others whenever possible, or like you said, like gatherings. If I'm I feel like I'm going to feel like staying home a lot less, obviously, but like if there's, there are times when it's like, oh yeah, after work, come do this or come do. I just feel like I'm really ready to just like engage and connect with humans and people again. And I just want to like go in, and I know I said this last year, but like I want to go into 2021 being, after vaccinations, and just be really optimistic about the world and try to embrace everyone and I mean, especially with all the social stuff going on now too, like, and it always has been, but it's become such a massive thing this year. It's like, I think it's always going to be about like sort of, doing the right thing and making sure others are, and being involved in things that I'm passionate about and things that I believe in. So those are like my sort of New Year's resolutions, is like live more fully,
Yeah. I think there's a two-step process, right? Like you meet a person, a complete stranger on the road, and you say, have you been vaccinated? And they say yes. And you say, me too. Do you want a French kiss right now from me? And then they say yes, and then that happens. Because that's what the world is going to be like.
I hope so, man. I hope it's all hugs and kisses around every stranger I meet. I mean, I really hope so, man. That's what I'm looking forward to, is connection. It feels like, and I even wrote this down, like it feels like 2021 is going to be this global or even like national rebirth, or it could be.
Yeah.
This idea of like
speaking of, we got about 20 days and 20 to really white knuckle it here for a bit. And then we'll see, but it just feels I really like a new beginning. It's going to be a new day in America. I really hope.
And then looking forward to projects I want to talk about.
I was gonna say we do have some like podcast stuff to talk about. I guess one last personal thing for me is that like this year being cooped up, health and exercise has not been a priority for me. It's been much more about like surviving, which I think is totally understandable. But I really think that's not sustainable or good for me. So I've already been trying to make exercise a part of like my daily routine, which has been really tough. I've never been like that before. That's awesome. Really just prioritizing, like, people talk about like self-care and the ways of like, I'm going to eat a pint of ice cream for self-care. And like, that I get it. That is a way of self-care. But I think my wife was talking about this, like taking care of yourself physically is also a way of self-care, right? Like being healthy and like feeling good. And I want to prioritize that in 2021. Like I really want to take care of myself physically. And I think that part of that is like getting the vaccine and knowing that like healthiness is an option. I want to make sure I'm healthy in like many other aspects. So that's my goal for 2021. That's like more of a true resolution thing of like, that's what I am really truly hoping for.
Cool, man. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I genuinely think that like staying active, like even just like if I'm in a bad mood, if I go take a walk, I think like it's good for my mental health. So I do kind of believe in the powers of exercise and all of that. So yeah, I mean, I can do some more of that as well. So I'll definitely be attempting to do more exercise and clean living in 2021 as well. So it's always a good resolution.
One of the things that I'm doing to help with that, and I'm already having success, I've been reading this book called Atomic Habits. And one of the things it talks about, many things that are good in that book, is it talks about habit stacking. And I've been able to do that because so essentially I've been waking up early in the morning for the first time in many years. And then I started stacking habits onto that. And one of the things I'm doing is like when I get back in from the early dog walk is I'm immediately getting on the stationary bike. And I'm starting to link those two things together. And you can start stacking on good habits in a row. So like every time I do that, I'm going to follow it up by showering. Every time I get out of the shower, I'm going to follow it up by, doing an hour of writing or whatever. Like you can start to stack them all together and link them. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah. It's a cool book if you want to check it out.
We'll hold you to that. Me and the podcast will hold you to that.
Yeah, you all do that. Okay, so projects we're looking forward to, a huge fucking grain of salt, as we well know from last year. All of this is subject to change. Maybe we are actually entering a worse dystopian hellscape in 2021.
No, not again, Luke, not again.
I have to hedge the bets a little bit, because maybe we'll look back at this and it'll be even more egregious. I don't know what it would be, but like, who fucking knows? It could be anything at this point. But assuming we do survive and assuming we do get to cover the things we want to cover, I want to fucking go to a movie again in theater, and I want that movie to be Dune. I just really want to fucking see Dune in a theater. Is that too much to ask, world? Come on.
I've thought about, if I thought it was completely safe, I would have already done one of the theaters where you just pay like $100 and you get the whole theater to yourself to watch whatever. I've thought about doing that so many times, and like I
Yeah.
wanted to, but I just have never been able to like.
It's like a high
convince
roller
myself to do
move
it.
too, though.
It's like $100 though. Like you can afford for like one time during the pandemic to spend $100, and you.
Yeah,
and,
but like $100 to watch a movie also just feels really extravagant to me.
Yeah, agreed. But anyway,
yeah.
I've wanted to so bad. I'm so looking forward to movie theaters coming back, and hopefully, let's save the movie industry or at least the theater industry before it collapses.
Yeah, it's in trouble.
It's in trouble, and that's something I do not want to see go away. I think that the theater experience, whether you watch a lot of stuff at home or not, the theater experience is something that's important. Period.
Predictions bound to go wrong. I am predicting a theater boom. I'm predicting people are going to want to go back to theaters.
I hope so.
Once vaccinations.
I hope so, man. Yeah, I agree. I hope that that's the case. But these streaming services are going all in right now.
I think we all miss it now. In my opinion.
It scares me that like theaters are like being over like. Things are dropping on streaming at the same time, and I hope that people will still go see stuff when that's the case after COVID. But anyway, the thing that I'm looking forward to a lot is The Stand, and we're going to be covering that. And
that's a good way to announce that, right? That's going to be our first project in 2021. Go ahead.
I just can't wait. It's a book. I was thinking about this earlier today. It's a book that I've been looking at the spine of in my dad's bookshelf since I was a kid. Since I was young. And I remember being like, that book is fucking massive. And then like, I always heard about it, and we've done so much Stephen King at this point. We've read so much Stephen King. It's such a massive part of the podcast because it was the beginning for us, and Stephen King has been a consistent. And then my girlfriend has read it during the right before the pandemic, and then it's also a pandemic, and I know that it's about slightly about disease and stuff, and I just think it's like the time and everything's lining up. I'm really excited to finally experience it.
And it's cool is it really does harken back to that first project, because once again it's a book I have read. I for a long time touted it as my favorite Stephen King novel. I'm going to be really interested to see if it holds up in that way, because I have now lived through and am living through a pandemic. Whereas when I read this originally, that was not the case. So that is going to affect the way I read this book. And I've also read just a ton of other stuff since then. So I'm a different person now, different reader. So I'll be curious to see if it really holds up. And then I will also have that same perspective like it, where it's like I will have read it before you haven't, so we can kind of have that back and forth. And then we're both going into a new adaptation we've never seen before. We're going to be watching the CBS show, which I don't know if it's going to be good or not. Hopefully it's at least okay. At the very least, it'll give us a comparison point to talk about with the book, which for a long time was this thing that like people were like, I don't know how you adapt this and do it right, because it does have a miniseries adaptation that is very middle of the road from everything I've heard. I haven't ever seen it, but it's just a really difficult thing, and it was in development hell for many, many years. Many different directors attached to it, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So it should be a fun project and harken back to the early days of ink to film, except for with all of our powers we've accrued over time. Sorry, I've been playing a lot of Hades, so I think about like accruing a lot of darkness and using that darkness to be more powerful.
We're more powerful than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, this time around we'll be way more powerful. Yeah, I mean, it's. I'm looking forward to that as well. I'm going to throw out one that I don't know for sure we're going to get into, but I kind of want to, and I hope we do, and that is The Hobbit. The Hobbit, for one, because like I already miss Lord of the Rings a little bit. I'm already kind of like sad about it, and then I know the movies are like, to oh. They kind of range from that.
Well, I'll be interested. That'll give us a really good moment to analyze exactly why and how and what happened and sort of in our own minds settle what's happened. And I know a lot of this stuff, but I think it'll be a fun one.
And there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff I know that like I've heard about, but like I'd be interested to know once we dive into it. But really it's about that book for me, which is like a really seminal piece of fantasy fiction in my love of fantasy that I read when I was really young. I'm really curious to see how it holds up or doesn't. I'm just excited for that one, and I kind of hope we get to it this year.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, when I read Harry Potter was my first fantasy love, and then when I was looking for other things to read, waiting for Harry Potter novels to come out, The Hobbit was something that I reached for and read, and like so it means a lot to me growing up. And like you said, it's sort of like I don't know if I can be this bold because I haven't read it in a long time, but it feels like sort of the perfect introduction to Middle Earth, and it feels like almost a perfect fantasy novel because it's so light while it's also
there's not very
and,
many, if any, women in that entire book, so I don't know about perfect, but it's close.
Yeah, problematic for sure. But I in terms of story structure and a lot of this other stuff, I think that a lot was taken from The Hobbit, and
absolutely.
I wonder, it'll be interesting to compare The Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings books that we've read now and see sort of where he grew and what changed in him and all of that as time went on.
Now, I kind of want to run down a quick list. I have a list I grabbed from our we have a document where we have a ton of titles, and this isn't even all of them. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to share just a rundown of some projects that are still outstanding for Ink to Film, just so you can get a feel. Because like we've been doing this this is going to be season number 5, right? Coming into and so we've been doing. It will be our 5th year doing this, and we've covered a lot. So I know that it can feel like, oh man, they must have covered almost everything by now. So this is a list of stuff we have yet to cover, not including like new things that aren't out yet, which there is always a bunch of that because there are new adaptations made every day. Here we go. I'm just going to read them quick. Okay, you ready?
Go for it.
Fight Club, The Last Unicorn, The Lost World, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Adaptation, Carrie, Misery, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Dracula, Don Quixote, Ender's Game, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, Gone Girl, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Hunger Games, I, Robot, Let the Right One In, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, No Country for Old Men, The Road, Shutter Island, Psycho, Sphere, Starship Troopers, The Never-Ending Story, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and World War Z. That's just a short list of things that we still have not covered yet.
Yeah, it'll never end. That's the long and the short of it is.
Yeah, and there's way more than that.
We'll never run out of content. We'll never run out of
If you heard something on that list that you really want to have us cover, definitely let us know.
Yeah.
We probably will cover 1 or 2 or more of things from that list this coming year. I just go ahead and predict that. I don't know which ones they're going to be yet, but we will get into some of those. And if you want to vote on polls that will probably include those projects, think about joining our Patreon. There we go. One more plug.
All right, enough plugging. So
this fucking year has been terrible. But we made it. If you're listening to this, you made it. So survivor bias.
Yeah, right.
We made it to 2021. Congratulations. It's dangerous to go it alone, but you have this in your pocket, in your phone, or in your podcast player of choice, and hopefully we can help out in any way we can. It's been humbling. It's been it's been our honor to be your companions this year.
Yeah, genuinely. I mean, it's like I can't imagine what this year looks like for me. I mean, there's been personal. I think I think everybody has had a shitty year, and I think everybody has had highlights in those shitty years. This has been one of my highlights, obviously.
All right, so only thing left is to put a bow on it. This turd sandwich that was the year.
Yeah.
And we're going to be back in 2021. We're going to take off 2 weeks, and then we will be back with The Stand by Stephen King. And until next year,
thanks for listening.